Thanks for joining us, everyone. We're just going to have an update from the People's Inquiry 2020 Committee. We've got Hannah Blackmore with us, Ursula Edgington, Hiro Hunapo and Rosemary Bonda. I'm Asher Anderson. We're just going to have a little update on what's going on in New Zealand. Hannah's going to update us on the situation in Auckland, where the council is wanting to bring back glyphosate to the streets. Hannah, would you share with us what's going on at the moment?
Yes, this is an extremely disturbing development. We have had non-chemical management of the weeds and vegetation on the roadsides in large areas of Auckland. Up to 1 million people for 20 odd years have had non-chemical management. And since 2000, we had a weed management policy that covered all of this, that included the prime thing that there was to be no chemical spraying. All roadsides were to be managed with non-chemical. This then became the 2013 weed management policy, which 7 years down the track has still not been implemented. And now they have finally come to this decision that they're going to harmonise the entire region with a combination herbicide spray, which means that glyphosate will now return to every street, every road, every berm throughout the city. And this failure to not only implement the policy, which has chemicals as the methodology of last resort, but the exposure of children to these toxic chemicals is of a huge concern that has been totally ignored, so that this document, which looks at the costs and the evaluations of taking this course, which is supposedly to save money and to reduce carbon emissions, has not one single mention throughout the document of the human health risks of returning to glyphosate. And this is a huge concern. So we have a couple of months in which to look at this and gather information before it comes before the Environment and Climate Change Committee meeting in November.
Okay, thank you. There was some discussion around the costings between the use of chemicals versus the use of the non-chemical means. Would you tell us a little bit about that?
Yes, this is again another extremely disturbing part of the element, in that for 20 years, parts of Auckland have been treated with a hot water technology. That hot water technology has in practice, because this is the only contract probably throughout the world that's been so long lasting, has been done on the streets. You know, they costed this out, and we know that hot water was done for approximately just under $1,200 a kilometre, and that in the last 5 years it was less than $1,000 a kilometre. Yet the documentation is based on the reason why they are going to get rid of all the thermal technologies is based on the fact that the cost per kilometre is $3,500. So there's an immediate disconnect there. We don't know where they've got their figures from. So there has been a degree of manipulation, and the company that was doing the hot water has not even been approached for their prices.
Right, right. What do you think has caused this reconsideration of harmonising, the use of glyphosate throughout the whole of Auckland?
Well, to be frank, I think that we have been fighting this, and I don't like to use the war terminologies, but we have been fighting against the use of chemicals. There has been attempts to overturn the thermal technologies since the day one of the last 20, 30 years. And documentation and OIA material that I've received shows that there has been a recommendation on the books since at least 2013 that they return to glyphosate on the roadways as a preferred option, because supposedly it's cheaper and it's easier. But the consequences of doing this shut off any future possibility of progress. It shuts off the possibility of you know, the recovery of the insects, the birds and the bees, and having that ability to have wildlife sanctuaries, pollinator pathways, all of that will go. And it's a dead end. Basically, it's a dead end. And the worst part about it is something that was quoted to me by an expert, that it's the jobs as well, because you employ glyphosate, it's one man in a truck going up and down the road spraying it. If you employ thermal technologies, it's only part of a whole integrated practice that employs a lot of people. And if you can do that and have a proper integrated policy at less than $1,000 a kilometre, why would you not be doing it? And this guy said to me, basically what's happening right now is that this method, this proposal is basically replacing green, meaningful jobs with toxic chemicals.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, thank you, Hannah. So if people want to find out, you know, more information about this, or if they would like to contact their counsellors to express their concern, how do you think they should go about that?
We are trying to get as much information up as possible onto our weed management advisory website. So people can go to that, which is weedmanagementadvisory.wordpress.com. At the moment, we've only got a few things up because this has been a breaking story for the last week. But we intend having all of the facts and information up there. And we have, there you'll see there are links to our children's campaign, which is our positive campaign that we initiated during lockdown for COVID in April. And that's basically to protect our children from toxic pesticides. So this is a positive, forward-looking program that can be done, and we've proven that it can be done. We don't want to go backwards.
Thank you very much, Hannah. Yeah, we're also dealing with, you know, continued aerial 1080 drops in New Zealand, and sadly, last Sunday on the 13th, Mt Pirongia in the Waikato was poisoned, and this is where one of our committee members, Ursula Edgington, lives. Ursula, would you share with us what's been going on in Mt Pirongia?
Yeah, I mean, there's some fascinating parallels between what Hannah was just describing with the glyphosate problem and the aerial 1080 operations throughout the country that are increasing in toxicity and location and regularity, because basically what we've discovered in the evidence that we've gathered over the last 2 years, really, since the Department of Conservation decided to aerially poison Mt Pirongia and Te Kauri blocks, you know, they decided to do that regardless of what the evidence of any of the so-called pest monitoring provided. So it didn't actually matter to them that the RTC of the possum count, for instance, was less than half what the target was, even after the poisoning. You know, it doesn't actually matter. So there's no rationale for the poisoning. And alongside that, the nature jobs, the genuinely sustainable nature jobs that Hannah was just talking about, are deliberately excluded. You know, the trappers that wanted to submit a tender for the work on the mountain, if it was needed, were deliberately excluded from the information that they needed. So some of them were submitting Official Information Act requests to DOC in order to get some of that information, but that wasn't provided until after the deadline for the tender submission had ended. By which time the machinery of the 1080 aerial operations was already in full swing, alongside the propaganda that goes out in the newspapers, etc. You know, claiming that aerial 1080 is the only way to deal with the plagues of rats and etc., and plagues of possums, which is total nonsense. So yeah, we've uncovered some interesting, you know, the ways that the corruption is, you know, it's fraud, it's out and out fraud, there's no doubt about that. The fact that the medical officers of health from the various DHBs appear to be signing off the application forms from the contractors to DOC without any due diligence. And the Ministry of Health have confirmed that they don't do any due diligence on the DHB's work. The Environmental Protection Agency are basically completely toothless, because the so-called audits that they do of the VTE, sorry, the vertebrate toxic agent application forms, just, you know, are just meaningless. They're not based on any meaningful penalties or disciplines or accountability even for those individuals that are involved with the operation. So, and this, you know, as in many of the operations, this one included the town water supply, the drinking water catchment. And to have, you know, thousands of people drinking potentially contaminated water is you know, is a very serious public health risk that should not just be dismissed, and, you know, without any proper testing or following up, monitoring of the health of the residents or anything like that. It's just, it's appalling. It's absolutely appalling what's been allowed to happen increasingly now for 65 years. So yeah, you know, it's just, it's difficult to comprehend the extent over the whole country that and the potential harm to New Zealanders and to the wildlife that this this shocking policy is doing to the countryside.
And this has happened on Sunday with tracks only being closed for 24 hours, and this is right as we go into the school holidays.
That's right.
People are being encouraged to spend more time outdoors in nature while, you know, these aerial 1080 poison drops are going on. So there's this real strong concern that we're going to see some people, you know, actually really harmed if you know, if they don't start paying attention. There's no antidote for this poison, so yeah, it's a real concern.
That's right. Without the tourists, you know, lots of these local attractions are trying to promote themselves as, you know, a positive way that we can all help support our own economy, and alongside that, of course, lots of propaganda has been for generations circulating about the so-called safety of this deadly poison that has no antidote. And so no wonder, you know, families are relatively blasé about the potential risks to their health and to their pets and their stock from the aerial poisoning. So yes, on Sunday we saw the car parks were full, people walking straight past the warning signs as the helicopters were gearing up their toxic hoppers to fly over the tracks. And no buffer zones really around the tracks, just flying straight over the tracks. A small buffer zone around the hut. It was highly likely somebody was camped in that hut that night. Yeah, the total disregard for any kind of risk assessment or any kind of risk mitigation is just shocking beyond belief.
All right, and just before we finish up, the medical officer of health, Dr. Richard Wall, was made aware that the consultations were fraudulent and there were a lot of problems with those. Would you just tell us a bit more about that? What was wrong with the consultation?
Yeah, I mean, there was lots of things wrong with it. Basically, in lots of cases, it just did not exist. There were no consultation meetings, even though they claimed that they had happened. From a resident's perspective here in Pirongia, we were noted on the application form that the contractor EcoFX Limited was about to consult with the residents. Well, that never happened. As a member of the community association, we simply got a notification 24 hours before the poisoning was about to happen. So there is some difficulty in the interpretation and the definitions of the word consultation. And the legalities are that consultation should happen for people who are affected parties, and that includes the local maraes and the various tribal groups who, you know, most of them, as far as I'm aware, there was only one of like 17 different maraes and tribal groups that consented to the poison. And reading the application form, which, as Dr. Wendy Pond says in her podcast that we've got on our website, you know, it was just totally fabricated. It's just invented, and a lot of it is copy and paste from a previous year's, in this case 2014, poison operation. So and nobody checks it, and nobody's held to account. So yeah, it's very concerning. And as you say, Asha, you know, people's health is at serious risk with this going forward during the summer months.
That's right. Yeah. And the next drop that you were mentioning,
down in the Tararuas, there's a potential aerial operation happening there, that where very similar situation. The maraes have not been consulted, and they've voiced their objection, and that's you know, that feeds, I think there's 4 or 5 drinking water catchments in over 77,000 hectares of mountain, you know, that's currently covered in snow. So again, you know, the pest monitoring is problematic, and the locals haven't been consulted, and yet still potentially, well, we know that 1/2 of that aerial operation has already been signed off by the medical officer of health, and the other one is imminent. So yeah, very concerning for the local people who just, you know, a lot of them just aren't aware of the dangers, and potentially they would go up on the tracks like they are here in Pirongia, you know, totally you know, not equipped, haven't brought their own drinking water with them, think that they can drink out of the streams that are potentially highly toxic.
Ursula, if people are wanting to find out more information about 1080, what do you think are some good sources of information?
Yes, there's a very good website that's partly run by my colleague, Dr. Joe Pollard, which is www.1080science.co.nz, which is basically built around a peer review of the IRMA 2008 reassessment of 1080, which was flawed. But there's also some additional information on there, including various scientific papers and links to other fact sheets that are very informative. And then if you're wanting some visual information, the TV Wild, so it's tv-wild.com, has got some documentaries on there regarding various past 1080 aerial operations, and also a breakdown of the some of the so-called peer-reviewed articles that DOC used to try and support their claim that 1080 is safe. So some deconstructed propaganda, if you like, that is interesting to look at as well. So yeah, and our Facebook page, of course, Ecocide Awareness NZ, which is currently in development. So yeah, if you want to help share any of our information on there, that's a great way to raise awareness.
Excellent, thank you everybody. Onwards and upwards, we keep working on these issues and keep raising awareness, and try to connect with you as regularly as we can as these issues are unfolding. Lend your support and keep sharing the message of a poison-free Aotearoa. Thanks everybody.
Thank you.
Thank you.